Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Well, hello there and welcome once again to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24, where we shatter the myths about employment law, make you workplace smart, about telling you all about your employment rights, which you have. They're robust, but you need to be taught about them. That's why we spend this half hour every week on this show. I'm John Scholes, your host, and joining me momentarily, employment lawyer Lior Samfiru from EmploymentLawyer.ca. I'll tell you right away how you can reach out to Lior anytime and his team. Always encouraged to do so. Ask those questions, have a conversation on your own time. 1-888-861-4555 is the way to do that. Ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca. A couple other websites I'll give you the information on. As the show carries on, the main topic in just a little bit is when you need to talk to an employment lawyer. Get Lior on your side. Outside, walking your dogs, putting in your dock in the summer, but just mainly employment law stuff is what he focuses on. He will do the other stuff for enough money, I would imagine, but we'll talk about that later. We got a busy show. We're going to get some emails and some other questions as we roll on here. But Lior, we always start off with the week that was, a case of the day, pal. What do you got going on?
Thanks for the intro, Johnny. I appreciate that. And yes, I am for hire in many respects.
That's right.
But great to be here to talk about employment law, talk about workplace rights, and to try to solve some of those issues that you may be facing if you're an employee, if your job has come to an end, or if it's a situation where you're being mistreated, your boss is being uncooperative, unsupportive, whatever that issue, if it has to do with your job, with your compensation, with your job security, this is the show where we talk about those things and we arm you with that knowledge so that we can kind of even out that playing field. Your employer may have a whole legal team and HR team, so they should know their obligations. They should know the law. Well, you now have your legal team as well, which is us right here, informing you about those very, very important things. And you can always continue the conversation beyond the show by reaching out to me in the office, phone or email. We'll give you that contact information throughout. But now that we know what we want to do, let's do it. John, let me tell you about a situation that came across my desk just over the past few days. I spoke with a gentleman that had worked for the same company for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. Good employee, but eventually, like many people, decided to leave his job, found another job, resigned and moved on. Fast forward 2 years later, old company says, we really want him back. So they go, they find him, they offer him more money and convince him to come back to work. He works, fast forward another 2 years, company is restructuring and decides to let him go. So they say, okay, you're a 2-year employee. We hired you back 2 years ago. We're going to pay you severance like a 2-year employee. And that's it. Well, he's not sure. Well, what about the 10 years I had before? So he does the smart thing. He calls me and he says, well, how much severance am I owed? And do I get credit for those first 10 years? So the answer is yes, he absolutely does. In many cases, most cases, in fact, if your service is interrupted, you leave, maybe you were let go, but then you came back, in most cases, you get credit for your full service, especially in a situation where the company sought you out. They came to you and they said, we want you to come back. So you get credit for that time. And that's important because now he is really a 10 or a 12-year employee. He should be getting credit for the 12 years of service. He's going to be owed 14, 15, 16 months of severance. But I wanted to remind everyone that you may actually have a lot more service and a lot more seniority than you may realize. The time that you had with the company previously may count. It's not just your last stretch with the company that counts. And of course, the more service you have, the more severance you get. So it's important to get this right. If that sounds like something familiar to you, just give me a call.
Lots of different ways to reach out. As mentioned, EmploymentLawyer.ca, great website. Among the contact information, there's also links to our long-running radio shows as well. There's also the phone number, of course, 1-888-861-4555. Now, the radio shows Lior and I have been doing for over a decade. We're across the country pretty much, including News Talk 1010, Sundays at 1 p.m. Always get a ton of phone calls. People want to ask questions. They want to know things. We encourage you every week to phone into the radio show. And who knows, your call may end up here on this TV show as well, from which we're going to get to our first phone call right now. Have a listen.
I've been providing professional services to a government organization, and I've been doing so since 2004. And I've been doing it as a contractor, but they've been treating me like an employee. And new management came in and they recognized that this could create problems with them if they continued the relationship that way. So they made efforts and did things to clean up the relationship, and I started truly functioning as a contractor. And within a year of doing that, they just recently approached me and verbally told me that they would not be renewing my contract when the term ended. So I'm just wondering, do I have any recourse?
So I want to be very clear here. You don't just become a contractor if you're an employee. You don't just become an employee if you're a contractor. Chances are you're one or the other, and you can't just shift back and forth between those two things. So in this situation, the law is going to consider her likely to be an employee all along. And this is a very, very common thing. When someone has been misclassified, they've worked for the same organization for a while, and all of a sudden, the relationship ends and the company says, no, you're a contractor. We don't owe you severance, any compensation, and we don't owe you anything. Except, guess what? If the law decides that you're an employee, and the law is the only one that can make that decision. Company doesn't, you don't make that decision, then you're owed severance. Chances are you have been misclassified. So if I'm right and she's misclassified, they're quote unquote ending her contract. That's nonsense. They're letting her go. That means she's owed severance. Now, to tell you how much severance, I actually want to show you how much severance. We're going to go to EmploymentLawyer.ca. We're going to use our severance calculator tool and find out exactly how much severance she's owed. So she's a professional, been working for 15 years. She's not a contractor. She's an employee. And you see on the screen right there, she's owed as much as 18 months of severance. 18 months. Her employer may say, no, you're a contractor. You get nothing. That's wrong. That would be a wrongful dismissal. Same with you at home. If you lost your job, chances are you are an employee unless you're operating a business, in which case you're owed severance. Doesn't matter what you signed, doesn't matter what the company says, the law makes that decision.
I want to mention as well that severance calculator available at Pocket Employment Lawyer, .ca, like Lior said, absolutely free. It's anonymous, and over 2 million Canadians have done exactly that. They've had their eyes open to how much severance they should actually be owed. That is the correct number. Okay, when an employment lawyer can help, we'll get to that, but we got to get into a short break first, which we'll do now, so we'll see you on the other side. In the meantime, always that contact information. Write it down and use it. 1-888-861-4555 and ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca. Lots more Ask a Lawyer is on the way, coming right up.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
And welcome back to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. Love you joining us every week at this time, but you can always reach out any other time. The phone call, first of all, 1-888-861-4555. Reachable by email, ask at EmploymentLawyer.ca as well. And as we mentioned off the top, Lior, we're going to get into this, and that is the times when an employment lawyer can help. We could have done a billion of these points, but we're going to narrow it down to like 5, give or take. First one, let's get this happening. When you've been let go from your job with or without cause. How about that?
Yeah, people often wonder, well, okay, I know there's such a thing as an employment lawyer. I know Lior, I've seen him on TV, but when should I be contacting him? When is it a time to pick up the phone or send that email versus a situation where it's not really needed? Well, the big one, the one where you, without exception, have to contact me always is if you lost your job. And the reason for that is in the vast majority of cases, when you lose your job, whatever you've been offered is a lot less than what you're actually owed. Your entitlements are far, far greater than you realize, usually far greater than what your employer realizes. So most of the time when someone contacts me when they lose their job, they're owed tens of thousands of dollars or more, not because I say so, because that's what the law provides. So You can't be let go without severance unless you did something awful. Employers often try to do that. They try to say they have cause, even though whatever you did doesn't rise to that level. You could be owed much severance. Or even in a simple restructuring type of a termination, maybe you're offered 3 months. Well, chances are you're probably owed 10 months or 12 months or more than that. So without exception, whether you've worked for 2 months or 20 years, whether you're young or old, whether you're in a junior position or a senior position, without exception, you have to call me, and you cannot sign that severance letter until you do.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Another time when an employment lawyer like Lior can help, and that is when you're dealing with workplace harassment. That is still around, if you can believe it.
It's around, and I'm going to go beyond that and say I deal with it now more often than I did before. So we all have a right to work in a harassment-free work environment. It's a very basic right that we all have, and it's the employer's responsibility to make it so, to keep that workplace healthy and safe and supportive. So if you're dealing with a harassment issue, first thing you want to try to do is deal with it internally. Tell the company about it. Give them the chance to investigate, to make it go away, to fix that problem. But if you can't, if you've tried and nothing's happened, or there's just no one to talk to at your company, that's where I come in. Okay, I can deal with that, and you want to do that. You don't want to continue being a victim of harassment. You don't want it to start impacting your health. You don't want to just quit because of that, because the law gives you significant entitlements and rights. So if you're a victim of harassment, if you cannot deal with it internally, you've tried, or there's not a possibility, you call me and let me do what I do.
What we're talking about this segment, of course, is times when an employment lawyer can really help, and you should reach out. This one as well, when there's been significant changes to your job, but without your permission, right, Lior?
That's right. Listen, if your employer is promoting you and you're happy about it, you don't need to call me. I wish you all the best then, and that's good news. But if the company makes negative changes to your terms of employment, that's not something they're allowed to do. I'm talking about changes to your hours. They reduce your hours. They change your shifts. Maybe they demote you. They take responsibilities. Maybe it's a relocation. You're going to have to travel a lot further to work. Your employer does not have the right to make these changes unilaterally. And if they do, you may be able to treat that as a constructive dismissal. But it's not as simple as saying, I've decided it's a constructive dismissal. We need to talk about it. We need to understand exactly what the changes were, how long ago they were implemented, and have a strategy in place to get you out of there with compensation. So your employer can't just change the terms of employment, but if those changes are happening in the workplace, you have a very small window to deal with it. Don't contact me 3 months after. That may be too late. As soon as you know changes are happening, hours, pay, shifts, call me right away, because that window, again, will close very quickly.
Okay, another scenario where an employment lawyer like Lior can help. In fact, we'll go further and say you definitely need to contact Lior in this situation. That's when you've been asked to sign a new employment agreement.
So you're already working for the company, you're an employee, and the employer shows up one day, say, hey, guess what, Mr. or Mrs. Employee, I want you to sign a new employment agreement. Red bells, red light, whatever you want to call it, be very concerned about that. It's never good news, okay? An employer is only going to ask you to sign a new employment agreement if it's good or better for the employer. So we need to understand what it says. We need to understand what it does. What kind of rights does it take away? Does it limit your future severance? Does it give the company the right to do all kinds of things that they wouldn't otherwise have a right to do? We can understand that. We can talk even about how to negotiate that. And I want you also to remember, you can't be punished or fired for cause for refusing to sign that employment agreement. So one of two things I want you to do. Either say I'm not signing it, or at a minimum, contact me. Send me a copy of that agreement. Let me read it and let me tell you what it does so that you know what you've been asked to sign.
Let's get to one more of these in this segment, times when an employment lawyer can help, and that's when you're dealing with a disability issue, right?
Your employer has to accommodate you, always, always, if you're on disability, or if you have a medical condition that requires that accommodation, or maybe if you need time off work. Your employer has to make that happen. And if they don't make that happen, if in fact they fail to allow you to take time off, they give you a hard time, they don't want to accommodate you, that's where I get involved. I can make them do it or get you compensation if needed. Same thing if you have a problem with the insurance company, the long-term disability insurance company. If they don't play ball, if they don't abide by what your doctor is saying, we can deal with that and make sure that they do what they're supposed to do.
We did mention earlier in the show a great resource, the go-to website, EmploymentLawyer.ca. You can use that anytime you would like to reach out to Lior. And beyond that, you can also find links to our long-running radio shows across the country, including News Talk 1010. That happens Sundays at 1 p.m. We got a ton of phone calls on our radio shows. We love our listeners, we love our viewers. Let's get to our second phone call for this show right now. Let's have a listen.
I was misdiagnosed with an epileptic seizure attack, so my employment put me on light duties. I requested a second opinion, and it looked good that it was a misdiagnosis. They brought me into a closed-door meeting and said, well, we have exhausted our requirements for your accommodating, and we are going to be laying you off for shortage of work. I'm not too sure whether severance is paid only for firings or layoffs.
Well, before we even talk about severance here, let's talk about the fact that the employer does not have a right to let you go because you need accommodation. Your employer, I touched on this right before, has to provide that accommodation, even if it's difficult, even if it costs money, even if they don't really want to. Well, too bad. Our human rights laws say you have to accommodate. And there's no such thing as, well, we've accommodated you for 3 months, that's enough. It doesn't work that way. You have to provide that accommodation. And what you're not allowed to do as an employer is to let someone go because of that accommodation, because they have a disability, because there's a serious medical condition. Illegal completely. Now, moving on from there, yes, if you lose your job, doesn't matter if it's lack of work, restructuring, cause, doesn't matter. Yes, you are owed your severance, your full severance, and that could be as much as 2 years' pay. So yeah, in this situation, this is a person I'd say, let's connect right away, because what your employer is doing, completely illegal.
I want to get to another phone call, but we'll do it on the other side of a short break, which we're going to dive into right now. I'll leave you for a moment here with the contact information again to get a hold of Lior and his team, 1-888-861-4555. Email is ask@employmentlawyer.ca. This is Ask a Lawyer. We got lots more coming up. Stick around.
You have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
All right, welcome back to Ask a Lawyer here on CP24. Good having you with us for the half hour. You're going to learn a lot every week, so stay tuned for following shows as well. Phone call number 3 from our long-running radio show. I talked about it before the break. Let's get into it right now, Lior.
I just have a friend who worked for a company for 4 years, and he just got laid off. So just like to know what severance pay is entitled to receive. Job was an assembling line. He's about 45. Actually, he told me that they told him that he wasn't supposed to receive a severance pay because this was a small company.
I'm so glad that he asked that question, because there is that misconception that somehow only large companies pay severance. Nonsense. Doesn't matter if you work for a company with 1 employee or 1,000 employees, you get severance. In fact, you get the same amount of severance. So let's see how much severance he's owed. I'm going to go back to our severance calculator tool, which you, of course, can find at pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. Let's plug the information in and let's see how much severance he is actually owed. So assembly line worker, worked there for 4 years, 45 years of age. You see that despite what the company said that he doesn't get anything, nonsense. Of course he's owed severance. 6 months is the right amount. 6 months of severance. You know, John, that's going to be a few, well, tens of thousands, presumably. So that's why it's so important to use pocketemploymentlawyer.ca, free and anonymous. You have to make it the very first place you go to if you lost your job or are about to lose your job.
Want to get to a quick email you got here recently there again, ask@employmentlawyer.ca. Says, my employer asked me to work overtime hours the last few months. She said that if the extra time ends up producing results, she will begin to pay me for it. Does that sound right? I, by the way, am a salaried worker.
There's no such thing as free labor. Let's be very clear. It doesn't exist. It's illegal. So you have to get paid overtime in Ontario if you work more than 44 hours a week. There's no such thing as we'll see how it goes. If you work it, you have to get paid. That's true Even if you're on a salary, you get time and a half for anything over 44 hours a week. By the way, you also get it even if your employer didn't ask you to do it, but you had to do it to get the job done. So no, what this employer is doing completely illegal. If that happens to you, contact me. You can even contact the Ministry of Labor. You have to get paid for that overtime.
Short break, more coming up though. A maternity misstep is on the way. We'll deal with that on the other side. Here's the number to reach out to Lior. Again, anytime, 1-888-861-4555. And email is ask@employmentlawyer.ca. We'll continue with more Ask a Lawyer. Go anywhere.
Do you have questions about your employment rights? Ask a Lawyer is here for you. Each week, experts from EmploymentLawyer.ca answer your questions. Visit cp24.com/askalawyer and watch Wednesdays at 9:30 p.m. on CP24.
Okay, welcome back to Ask a Lawyer. A few minutes to go here, so let's get to it. You want to join Lior anytime on his live streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, and LinkedIn at stlawyers.ca, at stlawyers.ca is how you do that. Here's the question, and we'll wrap it up for this week. It says, I'm supposed to return from mat leave in 2 weeks. My employer is suggesting I return to another role at the company because my original job has been filled. This new position is a big departure from my old one. Do I have to take it?
John, she wouldn't have to take it even if the new position wasn't a big departure. Your employer has to take you back to the same job, same position, same compensation that you had before the leave. And there's really no leeway here for the employer. They have to do that. Now, as long as that position exists, you get it. That may mean the company has to let go of the replacement or figure something else with that other person. But from the employee that's on parental leave, maternity leave, you get that same job. If your employer doesn't bring you back to the same job, that could be an employment standards violation, a human rights violation, a constructive dismissal, you name it, that's illegal. If that sounds like your situation, if that ever happens to you, call me right away.
And that will do it for this week. Next week on the show, employee or contractor. That's what we're going to deal with, so come back for that one as well. Any other time you want to reach out for more information, cp24.com/askalawyer. That phone number, 1-888-861-4555. The email we always go to is ask@employmentlawyer.ca. And of course, you have free anonymous access. You're encouraged to reach out at pocketemploymentlawyer.ca. That is it for this week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll catch you next week right here on Ask a Lawyer.